Initiation into Hermetics by France Barden. Part 10. Step 10. Magic Mental Training 10. Before the magician begins to follow the practice of the 10th and last step of this course, he may look back attentively and make sure that he achieved the positive realization of all he has been taught up to now. If that is not the case, he must try to make up for all he is still lacking and must go to any length for developing every faculty completely. Any kind of haste or hurry with respect to his development is useless and will work out awkwardly later in his magic task. To avoid disappointments, the magician is advised to take a sufficient amount of time and to work steadily but systematically. He must realize that this last step really represents the end of his magical development with respect to the first tarot card, and that he ought to be prepared for the higher magical tasks that I am going to describe in the following two works: The Practice of Magical Evocation and The Key to the True Kabbalah. If there were gaps in his schooling, he would never be able to control the higher powers. It is certainly not important whether he will finish his course a few months sooner or later. The main point will always be to keep his aim in mind and to advance steadily to the goal, the lofty heights of God cognition. Looking back to his actual development, the magician will realize that he has already covered a good distance on the path of his perfection, even more than he had supposed to. But he has to know that all this is but the thin edge of a wedge. Meditating on the fact how much knowledge and experience he has still to store, he will bow in a spirit of great reverence in front of the divine fount of wisdom. There will be no more pride or ambition, nor superciliousness, to say nothing of bad qualities in his heart, for the deeper he penetrates into God's workshop, the more humble and receptive he will become. The first task that the magician is facing in the 10th step is to win his way to the knowledge of the sphere of the elements. With his mental body, he will visit the different spheres of the elements, transfer himself to the kingdom of the gnomes or earth sprites, afterward to the kingdom of the water nymphs. He gets to know the kingdom of the fairies and finally that of the salamanders, the so-called kingdom of fire. To a non-magician, all this will be rubbish, and he will regard it as a utopian idea. But neither fairy tales nor sagas exist for the true adept, because they are to be understood as a sort of symbolism concealing many deep truths. It is the same thing with all the gnomes, nymphs, fairies, and salamanders. Based on his own observations, the magician can convince himself that beings like these really do exist. On the other hand, a magically untrained person whose senses are thoroughly undeveloped is of course subject to the vibrations of the material world only and will never be able to form a mental picture of the existence of any other kind of beings, to say nothing of being convinced of this fact. Most people are preoccupied by the material mode of life to such a degree that they will not understand anything higher and subtler outside our physical world, and least of all will they perceive it. It is quite otherwise with a magician who is developing his senses purposefully and therefore will see and perceive far more, convincing himself very soon of the existence of higher powers, planes, and beings. Properly speaking, it is the goal of our training to qualify the learner to perceive and to master not only the physical world, but the higher spheres equally. But let us stick to the practice and consider what can be done to reach the world of the elements. In the previous chapters, we learned that there is a kingdom of elements populated not only by the element itself, but by the corresponding beings too. Then what is the difference between a human being and an elemental being? The human being consists of 4 and 5 elements respectively, and is ruled by them, whereas an elemental being is composed of the purest element to which it belongs. According to our estimation of time, the duration of life of such a being probably is longer, but it has no immortal spirit. As a rule, such a being is resolved into its element again. Let us disregard the description of details for a while, because the magician will learn everything by practical experiences. He will be able to do so by transference of his spirit. The magician is bound to understand how to transfer himself to the kingdom of the elements to contact the beings there. Later, he will even manage to rule over these beings. In my next work, entitled The Practice of Magical Evocation, I shall treat the problem of summoning such beings to come to our material world. First of all, the magician has to realize that the kingdom of the elements has nothing to do with our material world, and that consequently he cannot transfer himself there without being qualified to do so. On the other hand, an elemental being can come to an understanding only with a congener, a fact that ought to be considered most carefully. A bird is well matched only with another bird. In the same way, an elemental being will have an understanding only with a congeneric being, that is, a being of the same element. Provided it should like to come in contact with another being, it would be bound to adopt a human form and human qualities to approach man in the form of man. At this point, the magician will realize why he had to perform transmutation exercises in the previous steps. A gnome will never understand a human being, and vice versa. When operating in this way, either the magician has to become a gnome, or the gnome has to be transmuted into a human being. Consequently, wishing to enter the kingdom of the earth sprites, the magician will have to take the shape of a gnome. If he can't imagine what a gnome looks like, he must use his faculty of clairvoyance in a trance, or with the help of a magic mirror. He will notice that gnomes are very tiny sprites, similar to the brownies described in fairy tales. Generally, they are portrayed as dwarfs with long beards and caps, with long hair, bright eyes, and garbed in little cowls. Such and similar will be the appearance of the gnome the magician will see in his magic mirror. He will also notice that every sprite is carrying a little lamp of different luminous force in order to find his way in the subterranean kingdom. If the magician has convinced himself of the gnome's shape, he only has to mentally take the shape of a gnome. Moreover, he must identify himself with the earth element, that is, load his whole shape with the earth element without any accumulation. Now the magician has to imagine nothing else but to sink down into the subterranean realm of the earth. Suddenly, he will feel deep darkness surrounding him everywhere. His imagination forms a lamp illuminating the darkness with its bright light. At first, he will not discern very much, but by repeating this experiment several times, his eyes will become accustomed to this dimness, so that he will discriminate beings in his own shape wishing to contact him. After a lot of attempts, he will see the sprite folk more distinctly. He will even have the opportunity of seeing them diligent in their business. But be on your guard against speaking to them. Do not ask a question before any of the sprites has addressed you. It may happen that in the course of their work, the magician has watched something that he might be tempted to criticize. He may be cautioned against doing so, for the earth sprites would overpower him instead of his bringing them under his control, which ought to be the purpose of this experiment. In such an occurrence, it might happen that by their various magical tricks, the gnomes could captivate him by means of the element so that he would become a gnome himself, unable to return to his own body. Then after a certain time, the mental bond between the astral and the physical body would break asunder, which would mean the physical death. In such a case, a medical expert would find out death from heart attack and nothing more. But the magician who has obtained the necessary control in the course of his magical training and considers this law has nothing to fear. On the contrary, as soon as the gnomes begin to talk, they see in him a being higher in rank and superior to them and will try to make friends with him. This law forbidding you to address gnomes first is meant only for the first visits. Later on, if the sprites are convinced of the magician's superiority in willpower and intelligence, they will enjoy it and become his most obedient servants. The earth sprites are nearest to man and like to serve him, especially if they recognize his superiority. Visits to the kingdom of the gnomes would be repeated as often as there is something new to be seen. He can learn a great deal from the gnomes and not one book in the whole wide world can reveal so many secrets about the subterranean kingdom to him as he can hear in the world of gnomes. For example, the magician can get a great deal of knowledge about the power and the effect of different herbs. He can learn how to achieve a magical spell on certain stones. He can be informed about hidden treasures and other strange things. He will be witness of everything that happens and exists below the surface of the earth, such as springs, coal, minerals, etc. The magician may learn several magic tricks that can be exploited through the earth element. In the course of time, the magician will notice that there are different groups of intelligences among the earth sprites in the world of the gnomes. He will meet gnomes who are able to give him a lecture on alchemy. When at last the magician feels quite at home in the kingdom of gnomes, and when he has made all the experiments that these beings were able to teach him, then he is allowed to visit the kingdom next to it, namely that of the water sprites or nymphs. In the very same way, he may look for a water sprite in his magic mirror, and he will find that there exists a significant likeness to a human being. There is hardly any difference to be noticed in shape or size. Usually the water sprites, called nixies, mermaids, or nymphs, are very attractive females, although there are male water sprites or mermen too. As for visits to the kingdom of water, it is not absolutely necessary to adopt the shape of a woman. It is entirely up to the magician to transmute himself imaginatively into a mermaid. There is an advantage here. He will not be molested so much by the mermaids, because they are not only fascinating and dashingly beautiful, but also very obtrusive and sexy, providing the magician is mentally prepared so that he has impregnated his spirit with water. He may transfer himself to a big lake or ocean, wherever he likes, and submerge down to the bottom of the water. Here as well, he will not meet water sprites at once, but by repeating the experiment many times and according to his vivid desire to communicate with these beings, he will finally attract them. At first, he will see only female beings moving about in the same free attitude as human beings do. He will hardly meet an unpleasant mermaid. In spite of the fact that all mermaids are very beautiful, he might indeed happen to meet the more intelligent ones, the so-called royal leaders, since a very peculiar class consciousness exists here. The magician will notice that they do not dance all the time, as they are generally supposed to do, but that they do a certain amount of work too. It's no use to write more about this theme, since the magician will convince himself. Here as well the rule goes that nobody must ever address one of the mermaids first, but he has to wait until the being starts talking or asking him questions about something. From the intelligent leaders, the magician can learn such a lot about the water element that he could write books himself. He gets information about the life of fish, about the different water plants, the stones below the water, and about other magic tricks related to the water element. But beware of the beauty of these beings. The magician is seriously warned not to fall madly in love with a mermaid and not to lose his balance. A love like this could become fateful to him. That does not exactly mean that he is not allowed to have fun with the mermaids. He must keep the motto in mind: love is the law, but love under a strong will. A mermaid is quite able to fascinate the magician with her incredible beauty, charm, and intoxicating eroticism, so much that he is in serious danger of becoming one of the kind, a fact that undoubtedly would cause his physical death. How many magicians have been wrecked by an unhappy love? Therefore, the magician should remain firm in command of his passions, because it is this kingdom in the sphere of elements that is the most attractive, and if the magician gave way to his passions, he would fall into the hands of the mermaids for good. As soon as the magician can manage to visit the kingdom of the water sprites as often as he likes, and if he has learned whatever concerns the knowledge of magic, he can pay his attention to the kingdom next to it, that of the aerial spirits. In contrast to the water kingdom, whose inhabitants like very much to communicate with human beings, the air sprites are very shy and unsociable. Similar to the water sprites, they have beautiful, dashing figures, and though male beings may be seen, most of them are females. Here the magician does not have to adopt a shape suitable for the air spirits. He can impregnate his own spirit with the air element and transfer himself imaginatively into the region of the air, wishing for the air spirits to contact him. He ought not to lose patience if he does not succeed for a while, but he has to keep his mind constantly on his desire to see the air spirits at any price. He will notice at first that the beings avoid meeting him, a fact that ought not to discourage him. Finally, he will see the most beautiful beings with a gorgeous etheric body, soft and supple. The magician must mentally imitate the air spirits by moving about as if floating in the air. Not long from now, the air spirits will address him. Here likewise the magician is cautioned against addressing any of the beings first, lest the same ill fate should befall him as previously described. If after repeated experiments the contact with the air sprites has been established, they will inform the magician about whatever concerns the air element. He will be taught many magic secrets and practices of which no man living would have the least inkling. Being fully acquainted with the air element and its beings, and mastering the magic technique, the magician may proceed to the spirits of the fire element, which he will now have to contact. These beings have a certain likeness to human beings, but they are rather odd in some ways, and it is therefore advisable for the magician to get an impression of these beings with the help of a magic mirror. He will notice that the fire spirits have a much smaller face than men and an extraordinarily long and thin neck. He will therefore transfer himself imaginatively into the shape of a fire sprite, loading it with the pure fire element, and off he goes to the spirit's sphere in a crater of a volcano, the most remarkable homestead of the fire spirits. The magician will notice that the fire sprites which are everywhere are roaming, nervous and fidgety as the element they belong to. The magician should remember not to talk first to any of the beings. Here too there are different groups of intelligences, and the high brows among these fire spirits are those whose outer appearance is more beautiful. The highest ranks of these organisms are the most similar to man, and it is obvious that the magician will try to come into contact with the most intelligent of them. As for the practice of magic, he will learn a great deal about what can be accomplished with the fire element. If the magician is now sufficiently acquainted with the fire spirits and their leaders in the crates, so that they taught him all he wanted to know, he may be allowed to visit those fire organisms that live in the deepest center of the earth and have a more profound knowledge. Not before having exhausted all possible sources of information about the fire element, may the magician regard himself as sovereign of all the elements. There is one conviction that the magician will win while visiting all the element organism, namely that however great the intelligence and knowledge of these sprites may be, they are still composed of one single element, whereas man represents all four elements plus the fifth, Akasha, the principle of God. Now he will understand why the Bible says that man is the most perfect of all beings, created by God in his own image. This is the reason for the discontent of all the elemental organisms at the sight of man's immortality, toward which all of them feel envy. It is understandable that each elemental being seeks to obtain immortality, and that the magician is in a position to bestow such an opportunity on them. Unfortunately, it is not possible for the time being to particularize how all this is brought about, but by now it can be taken for granted that the magician will intuitively find out all by himself. It is obvious that the magician will transfer all the experiences made through his contact with other creatures into his memory, into the physical body, and he will be able to use these experiences in practice on the material plane as well. A magician like this will be able to execute the most astounding performances of the magic of nature. After the magician's further progress in profoundly knowing and practically controlling the four elemental kingdoms, he may try to come into contact with his spiritual leader, his guru or genius. as mentioned previously with respect to the passive communication with the world beyond. Divine providence has given man a guardian angel or genius directing his mental development and watching over it. Here, for the first time, man came into passive contact with his genius. But thanks to his clairvoyance, he could see his genius whether in trance or in his magic mirror if he wished to contact him. But now he has advanced so far as to establish a visible connection with his genius on the mental plane. The practical performance is not difficult, provided the genius did not make himself known already to a magician while mastering the mental wandering. The practice of the visible connection with the genius needs only one thing, that is, to stand upright and to feel imaginatively grasped and carried off with a whirling motion into the air. Instead of being whirled into the air, one can imagine oneself being light as a feather and being pushed of the earth. This is left to the concentration of every individual. After several attempts, the magician will find out for himself which method is best suitable for him. If the magician thus ascends mentally, he will climb higher and higher until the earth looks like a small star, and while being completely removed from the globe and floating in the universe, he concentrates on the wish that his guide might appear before him, or that he might be drawn toward the guide. If not instantly, then certainly after some trials, the guide or guardian angel, or whatever you may call him, will become visible to the magician. The first meeting with his spiritual leader will make a deep impression on the magician, since henceforth he has the opportunity of mutual intercourse from mouth to ear. First of all, he will ask his genius when, how, and under what conditions he can contact him at any time. Every scholar then, of course, has to obey the instructions of the leader. From now on, the guru is taking over the magician's guidance. As soon as the connection with the guru has been established, the magician will enter the last phase of his mental development, and as the physical world has nothing more to offer him, he will visit other spheres. He will manage this in the same manner by ascending straight as a dart from the earth, concentrating on the sphere his wish is to visit, and according to his will, being attracted by the sphere. As there does not exist any perception of time and space for his spirit, he can visit any sphere instantly, either alone or in the company of his leader. According to the Kabbalistic tree of life, he will reach in turns, first the sphere of the moon, next the one of Mercury, then that of Venus, of the Sun, Mars, Jupiter, and finally the sphere of Saturn. On all spheres, he will meet the organisms living there, and he will learn to know all about their laws and secrets. If the magician has gone so far as to be able to visit the universe, that is the spheric planetary system of the organisms, and to master it, his mental training is completed. He has grown to be a perfect magician. He is a brother of the light, a true adept who has achieved a great deal, but not yet all. Magic Psychic Training 10. In the theoretical part of this course, I alluded to the notion of God, and the magician who has made appreciable progress in his development can start on the meditation of this concept of God. Before he begins to work through this last chapter of his development, he has to examine whether or not he is already mastering the psychic training of all the previous steps, whether he has accomplished the magic balance and ennobled his psychic personality to such a degree that the Godhead can live in it. Many religions talk about the practical connection with God, giving expression to the personal point of view that this connection can be established by addressing God in the form of a prayer, of adoration, or of giving thanks to God. The magician who has trodden the stony path of development up to here is not at all satisfied with a statement like this. God for the magician is the highest, most true, most lawful concept that exists. For this particular reason, right at the beginning of his initiation, the magician learned to respect this lawfulness regarding the universal laws, and he did observe it, since the conception of God has to be interpreted as an outcome of this universal lawfulness. Whichever spiritual group the would-be magician belongs to, whatever his creed or path to initiation may be, Without exception, he has to respect this universal lawfulness in his conception of God. The Christian will worship our Lord Jesus Christ as his highest ideal, attributing to him the four fundamental qualities or basic aspects that are manifest in the omnipresence. These fundamental qualities are omnipotence, omniscience or wisdom, all love or charity, and immortality. The magician will not regard his Christ as a manifestation endowed with only one quality, but regarding the universal laws in analogy to the four elements, he will revere him as the highest divinity. The same may be applied to the followers of Buddhism or any other religion. Provided the magician works correctly after having matured in magic, he will establish his God principle on these four fundaments with their basic qualities corresponding to the elements, and these four fundamental aspects of his deity will represent his highest concept of God. The concept of his God does not have to be linked to any person alive or past. It also can be expressed in a symbolic way. Fundamentally, it is absolutely the same thing whether the magician thinks of Christ, Buddha, a devil, a sun, a light, or a flame as a symbol of his supreme Godhead. It is not the imagination that matters here, but the quality that he imputes to this imagination. In any case, no matter what the religious faith or ideology, the imagination of God has to be the highest, the dearest, the most precious, and the most venerable of all things above, which there cannot be any kind of super God. The communication with his God can be effected by the magician in four different ways. 1. In the mystical passive manner. 2. In the magic active manner. 3. In the concrete manner. And 4. In the abstract manner. The true magician ought to be master of all these four methods, and it is left to him which of them he will choose for his future permanent connection. The mystical passive manner of unity with God is a privilege granted to most of the saints and all the believers to whom the divine principle manifested itself somehow in ecstasy. As the magician does not know in which form God will manifest to him, the kind of manifestation will be expressed according to his religious faith. In the instance of a Christian, this may happen in the form of a symbol, such as a white dove for the Holy Spirit, in the person of Christ himself, or in the shape of a cross. All this is, however, of secondary importance. The main point is the quality of the divinity that manifests itself to the respective person. How strong and pervasive this manifestation of God to the individual will be depends entirely in the measure of his mental and psychic maturity. This kind of manifestation will be experienced by all persons in whom a state of bodily rapture or ecstasy has been produced by deep meditation or by prayers. All the mystics, theosophists, bhakti yogis, etc., regard this kind of manifestation of God as the attainment of their aims. As history offers so many instances of this mystic unity with Christ God, I deem it superfluous to dwell on minute details. The second kind of revelation of God is the magic active one, peculiar to most of the magicians. The well-trained magician will try to come near or in touch with his deity by invocation. This kind also may be spoken of as a form of ecstasy, which, however, in contrast to the previously described concomitant manifestation, is being produced deliberately, step by step. In this kind of manifestation, which is the interior, the spiritual part of the magician rises up to God halfway, and the later comes to meet him halfway down. This invocation of the deity in the magic active manner is a theurgic, or a real magic form, which a magician is allowed to use only when he has gained the right measure of maturity. The manner of invocation is absolutely individual, because there does not exist any concrete method. The mystic passive, as well as the magic active invocation of God, can again be carried out by a concrete or an abstract form. The concrete invocation imagines God in a certain shape, whereas the abstract invocation is based on the imagination of the abstract idea of the divine qualities. The practice of the possible divine revelations is very simple. Supposing that the magician is meditating in the Akasha principle, that is in a state of trance, about God and its qualities. And when the expected symbol of God makes its appearance during this meditation, then one can speak of a mystical passive kind of revelation. But when the magician, with the help of his plastical imagination, whether outside or inside of himself, invokes the single qualities of his deity, regardless of his imagining these qualities in a concrete or an abstract form, then it all turns out to be a magical active invocation of God. He whose development has reached this point can attain not only to the mystic passive, but also to the magic active union with God. I prefer the methods of the concrete and abstract forms that can be managed by every magician. An excellent exercise preliminary to the concrete manifestation of the respective deity is to put a picture, a figure, or any symbol of the respective deity in front of you. Sit in the asana posture, staring intensely at the picture until an effigy of God appears before your closed eyes. While staring at the picture of the Godhead the magician is worshiping, he can perceive it afterwards on any white surface nearby. The visualization of the Godhead is an excellent prelude, allowing the magician to make the image of God appear before him. This preliminary step is to be repeated until the magician is able to imagine his deity as being alive at any time in any position at any place without the slightest effort. Then he can combine the picture he imagines with the corresponding divine qualities. At first, he will not succeed at once in coordinating all the four fundamental divine qualities he has been meditating about in the previous step with the picture in his imagination. He will therefore concentrate on one quality after the other. The concretization of the divine quality in the imagined picture is very important and has to be repeated many times until the magician's deity actually can be perceived by him as endowed with the four fundamental qualities. If the magician achieved this, he must imagine the object of his adoration not as a mere picture, but as a living being, acting, irradiating with such an intensity as if his personal God were standing real and alive in front of him. This is the so-called concrete union with the Godhead outside the own self. The more frequently the magician follows this method, the stronger and more effective will be the visual and sensuous deity before him. When he feels to have put all he knows about God's conception and realization into the object or picture of his devotion, then he may think of his living deity, which appears before his eyes with all the brilliance of the four basic qualities, as entering and filling his body, thus occupying the space of his soul. This has to be repeated by the magician until he feels the Godhead so strongly in himself that, losing his personal consciousness, he gets the sensation as if he were the deity he had imagined. By frequent repetition repeating this union with the Godhead, the magician adopts the qualities condensed in his imagination, and now it is no more the personal self that is acting through him, but his Godhead doing so. Thus he is experiencing the concrete union with God, union with his personal God, and it is no more his consciousness, his soul, or his spirit, but the manifestation of God's spirit that is speaking through his mouth. Here the magician is uniting himself with his God, becoming God himself for the time of the duration of this unity, sharing all the basic qualities of the Godhead he is united with. The method of concreted union with God is of the utmost importance for the magic practice, since a magician ought to be able to contact any Godhead whatever, irrespective of the creed, in this manner. This practice is indispensable in theurgy as well as in the conjuring magic, as it is the only way for the magician to bring about the union with a Godhead at any time, forcing the lower beings to execute his will. It is evident that in this manner, a magician can unite himself with the Godhead to such an extent that all the properties and powers indwelling the concreted Godhead that he is psychically united with become peculiar to him too, and continue being his qualities, even though severed from the imagination. The adepts call such divine qualities magic capacities or powers or siddhis. If the magician masters the performance of the concrete union with his Godhead, he is going to realize the abstract form of the unity with God. In the beginning, he may link the conception of God to an auxiliary conception such as light or fire, but later on he must refrain from doing so, projecting nothing else but the quality first outside, then inside of the own self. The aspect of the divine quality has to be connected the organ corresponding to the elements. For example, omnipotence is experienced in the head or love in the heart. By repeating this exercise frequently, one becomes identified with the abstract idea of God to such a degree that there is no need of any imagination of a region or a part of the body. Next, the four basic qualities can be combined into one idea that permits the introduction of the highest form of our conception of God. By repetition, God's manifestation is deepened so much that one feels oneself God. This unity with God must be so deep that during the meditation there is no God, neither within myself nor without, subject and object being melted into one another, so that there is nothing but I am God, or as the Indian in his Veda puts it, Tat Twamasi, that thou art. Arrived at this stage, the magician has completed his magical development in the astral form, and any further exercises will serve the purpose of deepening his meditations and to strengthen his godliness. 1. Communication with Godheads. When the magician has advanced so far in his incarnation of God that he can communicate with any deity, any intelligence, with every higher divine being, then he is able to work in every sphere he wishes to, not as a magician, but as a god. Herewith, the magic psychic training of the last step has come to an end. I have nothing more to say to the magician in this direction, because he has become one with God, and anything he will express or order during his unity with God will be just the same as if God himself did say it. Henceforth, he partakes of all the four basic qualities of the Godhead he is united with. Magic Physical Training 10, 1. Brahma and Shakti. He who knows other systems of initiation will find a certain parallel with my system, since all paths leading to truth must be the same. Let me mention here the Indian yoga system concerning the snake power that is in accordance with the systems of the Egyptian mysteries I have quoted. In Kundalini Yoga, the scholar is exhorted to meditate on the Muladhara center, the seat of which is the coccyx, and to perform pranayama exercises there. If we look closely at the symbolism of the Muladhara chakra, we shall find that this center has the shape of a yellow square with a red triangle in it. The center of it is a phallus wrapped 3.5 times with a snake. The Muladhara chakra is the first, most primitive and gross center that is symbolized by an elephant placed in a corner together with the respective goddess. This symbolic expression, called Laya Yoga in India, is unequivocal and means the key for the first stage of yoga. There are several explanations of this sign, but the correct one is that the square represents the earth, the triangle the three kingdoms of the material, astral, and mental world, the phallus the generative power or the imagination, and the serpent the path and the knowledge. The fact is well known to the scholar that the earth principle is composed of 4 elements, and it does not need any comment. The growing yogi first has to learn to know and control the 3 worlds. Consequently, the Muladhara chakra is nothing else but an initiating diagram corresponding to the first tarot card. Such an unsophisticated definition like this has never been given in India, and it is left to the scholar to find out by himself if he can master the Muladhara center, if he has accomplished the development corresponding to the Muladhara diagram on his spiritual path. The Muladhara chakra also has been called the Brahma center because in this phase of development, the yogi scholar recognizes Brahma as the Godhead in the most subtle manifestation. Brahma is the eternal, the inscrutable, the universal, the indefinable, the steady and the calm, and therefore the positive part. Brahma does not create out of himself, but all that has been created has been done so by his Shakti, the female principle. Shakti in the Muladhara chakra represents the serpent winding round the phallus and using the imagination, its creative power. A lot more could be said about this center, but the experienced magician will be satisfied with these hints to understand that a parallel exists between religious and initiating systems. Consequently, the Shakti or Kundalini power represents the imagination that the magician has to develop systematically. Casting a retrospective glance at our entire developmental system, the magician will certainly find that it is just this creative power of the phallus, namely the imagination and its development, that are playing the main role in his training. I have already finished the magic physical training in step 9. Therefore, I will restrict myself to discussing some occult powers in the following chapter. Although the magician will not necessarily have to master all of them, nothing must come as a surprise to him in his development, and he ought to have the correct explanation for every occult phenomenon. 2. Suggestion. In the chapter concerning the subconscious, I have talked about this theme by describing the self-suggestion. These instructions go for the suggestion of other people too. What is necessary here is to utter the suggestion formula strictly in the present tense and imperative form. A magician will always transfer the desired suggestion into the subconscious in the case of somebody who does not yet have mental maturity. The suggestion can be induced aloud or by telepathy. It is very easy indeed for a magician to practice suggestion at the greatest distance. He can do it in 2 ways, whether by visiting the subject mentally in order to influence him, best while he is asleep, or also removing the distance between himself and the subject with the help of Akasha in order to work with suggestion. It is obvious that any long-distance suggestion also can be carried out with a magic mirror. The effect of a suggestion also can be timed, that is, given in such a way as to be carried out at a fixed moment in the future, the time of the suggested effect having been transferred to the subconscious of the subject. 3. Telepathy. The field of telepathy is akin to suggestion. Certainly, it is a mere trifle for a magician to suggest his thoughts to any person. All he needs to consider is the fact that he has to transmit the thoughts not to the body or the soul, but simply to the spirit of the subject. He imagines the subject's spirit, to which he transmits the thought, omitting the material and astral body. Here it is left entirely to the magician whether to suggest to the subject that it is the magician's thought, or that of any other person, or else to allow the subject to think that it is his own idea. Not only ideas, but feelings as well can be transferred, near or far. The magician must transmit good and noble thoughts only with the help of his magic powers. I am convinced that no scholar or magician will degrade himself with any kind of misuse. Naturally, the thoughts also can be suggested against the will of a person. Mastering the elements, the magician can wipe out the thoughts of the subject, who is to be influenced by way of telepathy, suggesting to him thoughts that might appear desirable to the magician. 4. Hypnosis. Another field very similar to telepathy and suggestion is that of hypnosis, by which a person is sent to sleep forcibly and deprived of the free will. From the magical point of view, hypnosis is reprehensible, and it would be better not to specialize in this line. This does not mean that the magician is not able to lull people to sleep. The practice is imaginably simple. The magician need only suspend the function of the spirit by means of his will, or with the help of the electromagnetic fluid, and the person will fall asleep instantly. Here it is less important whether the magician is using telepathy or suggestion. He can use both of them as a makeshift, but he does not depend on them. A master of the powers does not need one or the other, because the very moment he paralyzes the will by way of imagination, sleep or unconsciousness will occur instantly, which will set free the subconscious and make it susceptible of any kind of suggestions. Just this act of violence, that is the intervention in the individuality of a human being, is not recommended from a magic point of view, and the magician will not revert to it unless to give his subject good and noble suggestions with an extremely strong effect. Even though the test subject should insist on being hypnotized by the magician, he should avoid doing so if possible. The true magician will always keep away from satisfying the curiosity of others by hypnotic experiments. At times of great danger, a well-trained magician may induce a sort of shock hypnosis by paralyzing the spirit of the opponent with a flash of the electromagnetic fluid, a method that is only to be followed in an emergency, which I hope will never happen in the life of any magician. It has been proven scientifically that animals can be hypnotized too. If a magician wants to do so, he will hit the instinctive side of the animal so that even the biggest and strongest animals are immediately knocked senseless. 5. Mass hypnosis of the fakirs. The mass hypnosis induced by Indian fakirs and jugglers that meets with so many admirers is no problem at all to the magician. The fakirs engaged in these performances generally do not know themselves how such phenomena are brought about, their secret being a matter of tradition handed down from one generation to the next. Supposing a certain spot or room is loaded with the Akasha principle, all the bystanders are likewise pervaded by the Akasha too, and this principle will prevail in all of them. Whatever has been induced in the Akasha principle necessarily has to be realized, since Akasha is the ultimate cause. In the light of this law, the mass hypnosis produced by the fakirs performing their shows in front of a crowd can be understood without any difficulty. The magician can do exactly the same things. With a traditional word or a formula, the fakir calls Akasha into the room and transfers into this principle the pictures he wants the audience to see. By repeating this experiment so many times, it has already become automatic, so that the fakir has to apply neither the imagination nor the Akasha or the act the spectators want to see. It is sufficient for him to utter the Akasha formula to hold the people spellbound, and afterwards he expressed the desired occurrence packed into short sentences or tantras in a low voice in turns, and the audience will perceive one picture after another in the same order. The fact that these formulas are genuine incantations sounds absolutely incredible, since such a secret is handed down traditionally from family to family for hundreds of years. Not even the owners of such a formula know exactly what sort of powers he is going to release. All he knows is that this or that will happen if he expresses the respective words, and he does not bother himself about the cause of it. Performances like these are very much admired indeed, mainly by people who haven't got the faintest idea of the higher laws of magic. In India, such a performance of an illusionist is nothing else but a matter of mere money. Making a snapshot of an experiment like this would be a disappointment because nothing at all of the marvelous scenes would be seen on the film, except the fakir and his partner sitting there smiling politely. This seemingly miraculous experiment is easily explained in the light of the magic laws, and therefore must be left to the individual to work at such things or even to specialize in them. But for the magician's development and rise, such experiments are absolutely useless. I only mention them to put the magician in the picture and let him find the explanation from the magical point of view. 6. Thought reading. A lot of publicity has been made about the problem of thought reading. This seems to be a matter of course for the magician, and he regards it as a concomitant of inferior value for his mental development. Thought reading can be performed by pictures, intuitions, inspirations, and so on, according to the mental attitude of the magician. It is not necessary to underline the fact that a subject's thoughts can be read not only if he is close by the magician, but also at a far distance, which is nothing else but the result of working in the Akasha. Every idea, every word, and every act finds its exact pattern in the Akasha, as detailed in the chapter dealing with the Akasha. If the magician concentrates on the spirit of the person in question, loading himself with Akasha, he can read the actual thoughts, and if he looks back with his innermost desire, he can also read the thoughts of the remotest past without any effort. As soon as he has achieved a certain skill in thought reading, after a long training, he will be able to read any thought, even the most hidden one. The forming of thoughts is an intellectual or imaginative act. Imaginative thoughts are easier to read. A perfect kind of thought reading can be obtained only if the magician has gained absolute mastery over his spirit, and therefore over his world of ideas too. This is the fundamental condition. Otherwise, he will be able to read thoughts only partially, or only if they are effective ones. Thought reading is no problem at all. It requires the contact from mind to mind. The magician has to feel himself a spirit, and all he needs to do is to establish the connection between himself and the person in question by imagining the subject spirit without the body and soul in order to seize all the thoughts he wants to know. 7. Psychometry. Psychometry means the faculty to read the present time as well as the past and, if it should be necessary, the future too of any object whatever, investigating all the events related with this object at whatever period. This ability is a concomitant of developed astral senses and easy to manage if the magician has undergone all the practical training taught in this course, and if he has learned how to soothe his astral senses in seeing, hearing, and feeling. All he has to do is to take the object that is to be investigated in his hand or to put it on that part of the body that is important for the exploration. If he means to see the happenings in pictures, to investigate them visually, he ought to press the object to his forehead. If he wants to perceive them acoustically, he must put it in the region of the heart. And if he wishes to search out the object intuitively or emotionally, he must bring it close to the solar plexus or simply hold the object in his hand. After concentrating on what he really wants to know, he induces akasha or a trance, and now he is capable of reading the different events of the past, present, or future with his mental eyes, ears, or feelings. The magician also is allowed to sue his magic mirror. In this manner, he can unroll all the events connected with an antique object, like in a motion picture, and he will learn all related anyhow to the object. Naturally, he has got the opportunity to see not only the sender of a letter, but also the thoughts that happen to be the person's mind at the given time. In a nutshell, he can read between the lines of any letter. To the field of psychometry also belongs the faculty to communicate with any person that came in touch with any object, because an object, no matter of what nature it happens to be, always represents the connecting link between the body, soul, and spirit of the magician and the person in question. No doubt the magician is able to read thoughts with the help of an object, even at the greatest distances. At the same time, he is able to learn all about the psychic side of the person concerned and to detect the qualities of character and the mental development in the world of Akasha without any effort. The same can be said about the material side, and he can fathom the past, present, and future once he has established the communication between his spirit and that of the person with respect to Akasha. Psychography is a variant of psychometry, but it is of little importance to a magician. Through the connecting link, the sender of the letter can be detected in all phases of his existence, but the object itself can serve to establish the contact with the respective person, influencing him mentally or physically and psychically. From these arguments, it has become patent that psychometry is nothing else but a subvariant of clairvoyance, which has already been dealt with in a previous chapter. 8. Memory suggestion. As we know, memory is an intellectual property possessed by every human being whose normal five senses are intact. But at the same time, the memory is the receiver of thoughts and ideas from the mental and Akasha world as well. We know that all thoughts and ideas are transferred to Akasha, and that the memory, thanks to its receptive quality, calls back these ideas from the Akasha and the mental sphere to the consciousness. Being quite at home in the Akasha, the magician is able to influence the memory in a direct or an indirect way. The direct way is to reinforce the memory by means of the corresponding element or the electromagnetic fluid, or by mere influence on the subconscious with the help of imagination. But when working on the memory, he can, if he wishes, wipe out or weaken or diminish certain ideas and impressions in the consciousness and consequently in the memory by means of his imagination. The indirect way of influencing the memory is to do so indirectly with the help of the Akasha principle. The magician sees everybody's train of thoughts and pictures in the Akasha and can evidently make them fade away with the help of imagination, destroying the connection between the pictures in Akasha and the person concerned. Because the magician has the possibility of depriving every person of the memory in this manner, he may be warned seriously against misusing this strong power. Nobody who is aspiring to ethical development will be persuaded to do a deed like this. The magician will certainly utilize this faculty only when he wants to weaken or to wipe out anyone's bad experiences or occurrences that left deep impressions on the person's memory. The magician can do all the good in the world by effacing a deep sorrow or a disappointment a person cannot get over. He can experiment with it in his own life as well, provided that he once suffered from mental shocks or bitter disappointments that keep coming back to his memory. Such pictures will never enter his memory again once they have been wiped out in Akasha. But if he does manage to master these remembrances by his will, by self-suggestion or other methods, there is no need for a drastic interference in Akasha to have these pictures wiped out once and for all. The pathologic loss of memory can be explained by the fact that the connection with the mental world and therefore with Akasha became paralyzed from time to time. But this condition is already a disharmony, an illness, a mental disturbance if it occurred as the result of different causes such as a shock and the like. 9. Working in the Akasha. In the same way as the memory can be influenced and certain remembrances be wiped out with the help of Akasha, the magician is able to obliterate not only certain ideas and recollections, but also certain causes that are registered in the Akasha and turn out as influences of the fate on himself or other people, provided he has the correct motivation. Supposing he wipes out a cause that the subject created himself, he has to establish another cause in place of the one he wiped out, which is destined to have a corresponding effect of the fate of the person in question. This interference in man's life must not happen for frivolous reasons, whether the magician himself or other people be concerned. The magician can intervene in such a matter only if he can take the full responsibility for his action before divine providence. Wiping out a cause and creating a new one, whether a favorable or unfavorable one, is best done with the help of an electromagnetic volt. There are some more methods, but all of them are based on the willpower and the respective imagination, and the magician can determine them after his own free will. The fact that a magician can change fate, wiping out its cause, and with it the sins as well sins so far as regarded in the religious way, for sins are nothing but moral views of religions, has been pointed out by our Lord Jesus Christ when he said, "To whom I forgave the sins, they will be forgiven forever." 10. Long-distance impregnation of rooms. Previously, I discussed the impregnation of a room in which the magician himself happens to be, and I also recommended several implements, such as the magic mirror combined with a fluid condenser. One fact I did not mention till now is that the magician also can impregnate a room at a distance. There are two ways to do so. Firstly, the magician visits the room in his spirit or in his astral body, performing the desired impregnation there with the help of his imagination, using the same instructions I gave in the chapter concerning room impregnation. The second possibility is linking this room to the room the magician is living in with the help of Akasha, so that the two rooms become one in the Akasha. In consequence of connecting the two rooms, the greatest distance will be bridged, of course. Whatever the magician impregnates his room with is naturally passed over to the other room too, irrespective of distance. 11. Messages through the air. This kind of transmission is in general use in the Orient and mainly in Tibet between magicians and adepts. If the distance, however great it may be between a person or a room, has been bridged through the Akasha principle, thus spanning time and space. A person communicating in this condition with somebody is not only able to read and transfer the thoughts, but also to produce and receive physical manifestations by conveying the electromagnetic fluid to these two bridge poles, which are already linked in Akasha. In this manner, sentences spoken in the magician's room can be heard physically quite distinctly in the room, connected to the magicians through the Akasha. If the distant person answers, he can be heard in the magician's room as clearly as if the sender were there in person. It is essential to produce the electromagnetic fluid in the exact way I described in the chapter about volting, except that it does not adopt the shape of a ball, but that of the room. Such an electromagnetic Akasha combination allows words and sentences to be spoken and transferred to the greatest distances. These messages can be heard or perceived by persons who are neither initiated nor magically trained. This method can be materialized to such a degree that it can produce even a physical effect. The point here is not so much to transmit ideas, but physical words, which is known in science as wireless transmitting and receiving. The ether in which the vibration waves of the words are moving is the Akasha principle, and the electricity necessary for it is the electromagnetic fluid. The magician knows from experience that whatever science has produced in the physical way, no matter whether by electricity, magnetism, heat, and so on, can be accomplished with the help of magic too. In this manner, it is possible to transmit words, sound waves, and pictures. Visibly materialized pictures produced by imagination in such a magically prepared room can be seen by people anywhere, provided they are connected acoustically with the broadcasting studio, that is the magician's workroom. It is also evident that transferences of feelings, smells, and the like are possible by means of Akasha and the electromagnetic fluid that transmits them to the greatest distance. The effects of elements also can be transferred in this manner. The material ether is by no means exhausted yet, and the future will teach us that one day we shall not only transmit sound and pictures like those of television, but also other quite different powers. Here is a wide field of activity for science, and I am sure there will be a time when thermic waves heat will be transferred through the ether. Here the magician can start a lot of events that could be accomplished through the ether, and he will also be able to put the magic knowledge in perfect harmony with the technical arts and with chemistry. Based on the universal laws, he would be able to make more and greater inventions, but every anticipation, as far as evolution is concerned, would be faithful to the magician. 12. Exteriorization. The magician has learned in this course how to sever his mental and his astral body from the physical body, and the problem therefore does not represent anything new to him. What he ignores is the fact that he does not have to separate the whole mental or astral body while performing this experiment, but that he can exteriorize or disconnect single parts of the body. The mental and the astral body not being confined to time or space, the magician will be able to transfer different parts of his body, even to the farthest distance, as soon as he separates these parts in the Akasha with the help of imagination. For example, he will be able to transfer one or both of his eyes anywhere else in order to get impressions there in exactly the same way as if he were there physically, without wasting force in transferring his whole mental or astral body. He can do the same with his mental or psychic ears in order to hear things at unlimited distances. At first, he will perform it through imagination with his spiritual body only, and later with his astral body. In this manner, he will be able to see and to hear anywhere at the same time by means of his transferred eyes and ears without being in a state of trance or in the primary world. As soon as he possesses a certain skill in the eye-ear practice, he can try the same experiment with his hands and gradually with his feet as well. He will do so mentally at first, then with his astral hands, and by condensing the latter with the help of the earth element, he can materialize them physically. It is obvious that he will be able to make himself conspicuous by these materialized hands, causing knocking sounds, etc. Naturally, a lot of spooks could be performed in this manner, but a true magician will not waste his precious time in such childish tricks. The faculty of writing at a distance between living persons may be interpreted in this manner too. Supposing a skilled magician has exteriorized his mental and his astral hand with the help of imagination by thinking of the hand as being somewhere else where a piece of paper and a pencil are prepared. His mental and his astral hand can seize the partner's hand at any distance and give normal messages. It is even possible to transfer the magician's correct handwriting by this experiment. Adepts call this particular feat writing at distance between living persons. If the magician has gained a certain mastery in exteriorizing his hands and feet, objects can be transferred in the same way. In a later chapter, I am going to describe how to make an object invisible. The magician will notice that he cannot hear with his physical ears or see with his physical eyes, nor will he perceive anything at all that happens near him while exteriorizing his eyes or ears outside his body, even if he kept his eyes open. As for the exteriorization of a limb, say the hand, it will remain lifeless, cataleptic until the mental or astral limb has been reconnected with the body. 13. Magic of becoming invisible. In many fairy tales, the story goes that a sorcerer has made himself invisible, or that there is a peculiar ring that makes people invisible if they twist it round their finger. Many books describe talismans and gems granting the bearer the gift of invisibility and giving instructions in this line too. But nothing of this kind is reliable nor of any use for real practice. On the other hand, based on the universal laws and on what we have learned up to now, we shall try to prove that making invisible is a matter of fact from the magic point of view. To start with, we have to distinguish between a mental or spiritual, an astral or psychic, and a physical invisibility. Making the mental body, that is the spirit, invisible has no particular value, but it is nevertheless possible that situations will occur in life where this practice could be useful. Suppose the magician wants to transfer himself mentally or psychically somewhere, and he does no wish to be perceived by beings of some kind or by the skilled senses of anybody else. He can utilize the mental invisibility. Take, for example, a guru who wants to visit his scholar mentally in order to check on him. Thus made invisible, the master will be quite near the scholar without being noticed, even if he had already developed his senses fully. Furthermore, a magician could attend to the evil works of the so-called black magicians in order to learn everything about their doings, or if necessary, to perform a certain influence without being noticed by these black magicians and their beings. There may be other conditions in life where it will be advisable to resort to making oneself invisible mentally or astrally. Becoming mentally invisible is very simple, and it is accomplished by filling the mental body with akasha from head to toe. The mental body will instantly vanish out of any being's sight, since akasha is without any color and without any vibration. If the spirit of the magician should perform any act on one of the mental planes, this would be registered in the akasha principle, and in spite of being invisible, his activity could be found out by means of clairvoyance. To prevent this, the magician has to wrap his whole body with a black cover as soon as he has filled his mental body with akasha. It does not matter whether this cover has the shape of a ball or an egg. He must not forget to seclude himself from all with akasha, underneath his feet as well as above his head. Before going somewhere else in this condition of invisibility, he ought to concentrate on the fact that his activity should be neutralized by the akasha. That means it should not be written into the akasha, i.e., leave no trace at all. This concentration is necessary, for otherwise the magician must fear that, though rather illegibly, several new causes might be registered in the akasha. The magician is fully responsible for every action he is carrying out in the mental world, even though invisibly. Fate is no longer able to harm him because he has become the master of akasha, master of his fate. Henceforth, he is subject only to divine providence. If he misused his knowledge for evil deeds, it would be divine providence that would punish him instead of fate. Divine providence would give him, as it were, the cold shoulder, and he would have to live on as a lonely individual forsaken in the universe. The only possibility of relying on divine providence would be lost forever, which surely would be worse than any curse. Such a magician would be doomed to destruction, and he can easily realize what that would mean from the magical point of view, provided that one is proficient enough in making and becoming invisible in mental wandering. The same procedure also can be used in sending out the astral body. Here as well, the practice of loading the whole personality with akasha is very much in line with the loading of the mental and astral body together. The other measures are the same as previously described. From the magic standpoint, it is also possible to become invisible on the physical plane. But here invisibility is not produced by akasha by means of light. Filling the physical body with light, it must be in harmony with the intensity of the light prevailing at the moment. If the accumulation of light were stronger than necessary, one would not become invisible, but transparent and bright, similar to the sun, shining white without and within. Physical invisibility is very difficult to produce. It requires years of training and practice, and hardly anybody but adepts of the highest ranks can execute such an operation correctly. Supposing he has achieved this great skill of making invisible his mental and astral bodies, and eventually his physical body too, the magician is in a position to bring about the disappearance of any material object. Another way to do this is by the transmutation of an object from the solid into the astral form, by means of imagination in connection with akasha. The object vanishes instantly from the sight of any person whose magic senses have not been sufficiently developed. An object transformed into the astral form can be transferred by the astral body of an entity or by the magician himself to any distance. The magician or entity performing this transference also has the task of transferring the object from the astral condition back into its physical form. This kind of object transference often is practiced by creatures of spiritualistic mediums, provided the point is a phenomenon based on an unmistakable materialization, although such things are extremely rare. But whatever planetary and extraplanetary intelligences may be able to perform also can be done by the magician who is acquainted with the universal laws and has made good progress in his development. There is still one more method of making invisible: the deviation of the senses, which is practiced in all kinds of hypnosis and in that form of suggestion in which entities produce a number of vibrations corresponding to that of the light in the physical body, thus effecting invisibility. Some more instructions referring to this problem will be found in my book, The Practice of Magical Evocation. 14. Practices with elements. A great number of possibilities are offered to a magician who wishes to specialize more particularly in the use of the elements, provided he has condensed or materialized the element with which he is working in such a manner that the elemental power has become a real physical power. Being perfect in doing so, he can, through condensation of the earth element in his body, produce such an invulnerability of his body that it resembles that shown by Indian fakirs in their performances. He is able to run pointed objects through his muscles without feeling the slightest pain or losing a tiny drop of blood or leaving a scar. Fakir's insensitivity to pain when lying on a nail board is brought about to a certain extent by autosuggestion, but a magician produces much the same effect much faster with the help of the earth element. He is indeed able to cure big cuts on his own or another person's body directly with the earth element without leaving a scar. A gaping wound that normally would require a surgeon's aid really can be healed in a few minutes. The earth element that he condenses outside of his own person enables him to condense every thought, impression, or being, whether deceased or not embodied, to such a degree that it becomes visible to a completely untrained person and can be photographed. The magician has the great advantage of being able instantly to paralyze anybody, man or animal, even his deadly enemy, by the extremely quick projection of the earth element. There are some more possibilities of employing this element, but I hope that the above remarks may be sufficient meanwhile. When projected and condensed very strongly in itself, the water element helps the magician to withstand the greatest heat without his body being scorched or burnt. When projected into the hands, the water element permits the magician to hold red-hot coals or irons without any damage being done to his hands. He could even stand smiling at a burning stake, and nothing at all would happen to him. Let me draw your attention to the biblical event where the young man remained unhurt in the red-hot oven. John, the favorite disciple of our Lord, is said to have been immersed in a boiler with burning oil, and no harm was done to him either. The magician will now see that events like these are not only legendary traditions, but they really did take place, and such apparent miracles can be performed by mastering the elements. Every kind of fire, regardless of its extension, can be extinguished with the help of the projected and condensed water element. Of course, the magician can perform almost miraculous feats with the air element too in the same or similar manner. With the help of the fire element, the magician is able to stand the greatest cold if he accumulates this element in himself. The llamas in Tiber can produce an enormous heat in their bodies with the help of the accumulated fire element, so that they can quickly dry wet sheets wrapped on their bodies in the middle of winter. This experiment is known as tumo in Tibet. Any kind of combustible material can be ignited with the outward projected fire element. The Bible describes similar occurrences where stakes soaked with water were set on fire by means of the fire element. There is no doubt that a plant, for example a tree, can be made to die through the projection of the fire element. Did not our Lord Jesus Christ make the leaves of a fig tree dry up to demonstrate his power? He considered the same law, performing the projection with the help of a magic word Kabbalah that indirectly caused the fire element to carry out his command. Backed by the universal laws respecting the mastery of the elements, the perfect magician will bring about a number of other magic performances with the aid of the elements. 15. Levitation phenomena. Levitation means the abolition of the law of gravitation. Based on the universal laws, the magician has found out that the power of gravity depends on the magnetic attraction of the earth. The gravity of his own body can be abolished in two ways. Firstly, through constant loading or accumulations of the air element Vayutattva. The primary quality of this element is realized to such a degree that a man feels light as a feather and can rise and float in the air like a balloon. The second method demands the mastery of the electromagnetic fluid. By accumulating the magnetic fluid in the body to such a degree of density that it corresponds to the weight of the body, the effect of gravity will be neutralized altogether. In this condition of loading, the magician will hardly touch the ground, and he can even move on the surface of the water, regardless of its depth. Condensing the magnetic fluid more and more, he can raise his body into the air at will, and by means of the air element or the self-produced movement of the air, he can be carried in any direction. The speed of transport in the air depends entirely on his will. Many of the yogis possess a remarkable ability in mastering these levitation phenomena, and even in the Bible we read that our Lord Jesus Christ walked on the surface of the sea. Considering what has been said heretofore, it seems quite evident that objects or even people who are not magically trained can be carried away by the magician by this method, if he wishes to do so. The accumulation of the necessary magnetic fluid can be performed by the magically trained imagination, or with the help of some other practices such as Kabbalah, interference of beings or ghosts, and so on. The elimination of the electric fluid in the body and the increase of the magnetic fluid can take place not only deliberately but unconsciously as well. For example, in the cases of spiritualistic mediums and somnambulists where the electric fluid is abolished by trance and the magnetic fluid is increased in return. In consequence of the sudden loss of the electric fluid when asleep, moonstruck people may be observed to climb a wall like a fly, or to move about on the roof or a house or on a wire. The magnetic overloading of moonstruck subjects can be traced to the influence of the moon. That is why somnambulism is called moon madness. In any case, this condition is a disharmony, a disturbance of the electromagnetic fluid, and consequently a pathological state or an illness. A person afflicted in this manner can be treated only by harmonizing the electric fluid, which has to be increased in the body. This summarized interpretation of the levitation phenomenon should suffice the magician for the present, although he might draw the conclusion from the foregoing paragraphs that it would be possible also to produce the opposite effect, that is, an increased attractive or gravitational power. As a matter of fact, that effect is brought about by increasing the electric fluid polarity instead of the magnetic one. This explanation is unequivocal if the magician takes into consideration the basic law of physics, which says that like poles of two magnets repel one another, just as two unlike forces attract each other. 16. Phenomena of nature. With the help of the elements and the electromagnetic fluid, the magician can produce the phenomena of nature on a large or small scale. He will, however, need more space in order to be able to project and condense the necessary powers. By the projection of the air element, he can influence the movement of the air, the wind, or by projecting the water element, he can make rain. He can conjure thunderstorms with the electromagnetic fluid by projecting electric and magnetic volts in the air, which when they clash will cause lightning. By concentration of the magnetic fluid, he can draw the water element from the greatest distance, automatically making rain in this way. Obviously, he is also able to achieve the opposite effect of stopping unwelcome rain or by scattering the clouds. Hailstorms may be brought about or directed elsewhere, for any influence whatsoever can be exerted on nature through the elements or the electromagnetic fluid. This sort of weather making is practiced often by the Tibetan lamas. Thus, in this as in so many other ways, the magician knows various methods to cause these phenomena and is able to do this with his own powers after a special training, just as the Tibetan Lama brings about with the help of rites, evocation of beings, and Tantra. 17. Power over life and death. A magician who perfectly masters the elements and the electromagnetic fluid also is master over life and death of every human being. But he will never dare to menace the lives of his fellow men, though he knows exactly how to induce a magical death. There would be a lot of possibilities of doing so, but I desist from quoting such methods in order not to lead the magician into temptation. According to the universal laws, a magician of illumined spirit and perfect mastery of occult faculties and powers also will be able to raise the recently deceased from the dead. Backed by his high mystical experiences and with the help of his well-trained senses, the magician can see not only the working of the elements in the body, spirit, and soul, but also the effect of the electromagnetic fluid. Moreover, he can notice the connecting bond between the material, astral, and mental bodies, and he knows how all this can be influenced according to the universal laws. It will be easy for him to restore the two connecting links by means of the elements and the electromagnetic fluid. In a case where no vital organ has been destroyed, the magician can restore to life, provided he has been destined by divine providence to do so. He can cancel the death of persons or animals killed by electric shock, lightning, or similar events. All he has to do in such cases is to establish the contact with the spirit in Akasha, deliberately inducing the electromagnetic fluid between the spirit and the soul in order to fix the connecting link between them. Then he has to do the same with respect to the astral matrix, connecting the soul and body by means of the elements and the electromagnetic fluid. The deceased one is restored to life by instantaneously filling the body with the principle of light. This is the synthesis of the resuscitation in the magical way, as induced with the powers of the elements and the electromagnetic fluid, no matter whether willpower or other methods play a role in it. It is well known that higher adepts have accomplished such resuscitations. Before finishing step 10, I am going to point out once more that not all of the magic faculties described here have to be mastered. In recognition of and obedience to the spiritual law that governs the universe, I have given the magician directions of how to break about such phenomena bordering on the miraculous. It is left entirely to the magician himself how far he is going to specialize in one or the other of the disciplines. A perfectly skilled adept can execute everything and perform even greater magic phenomena than the ones I have mentioned here in the light of the universal laws. Consequently, the complete course of instruction concerning the first tarot card, the one of the magician, has come to an end. People who have made up their minds to follow this course practically have been given the opportunity of completing their development. There is no other way to render the practice more understandable than I did. The description I have given here responds to the knowledge handed down till now only in the temples of mysteries and imparted to the most selected and trustworthy scholars. Those who want quick results will be disappointed, for sometimes these studies will spread over years. But his fact will not deter the sincere scholar from penetrating the knowledge of the first initiation. For this reason, the first card, the magician, represents the gate to true initiation. A great many people who have been smiling ironically about the problem of magic probably will have to change their minds after reading this book. There are so many misconceptions about magic, and you should never forget that things are often misinterpreted. Magic is the most difficult knowledge on earth that has to be mastered not only theoretically, but first of all practically. It is much easier to attain intellectual knowledge than to become a true magician. Summary of exercises of Step 10. 1. Magic mental training. 1. Elevation of the spirit to higher levels. 2. Magic psychic training. 1. Conscious communication with the personal God. 2. Communication with deities, etc. 3. Magic physical training. 1. Several methods for acquiring magic faculties. End of Step 10. Epilogue. As I have already mentioned in the introduction to this volume, this handbook is not destined to be the stepping stone in the search after wealth and honor, but it has to serve the purpose of studying man, the microcosm in relation to the macrocosmic universe together with their laws. So the reader's opinion about magic will undergo a noticeable change, and I hope he will never more degrade this ancient wisdom to sorcery and similar pieces of devilry. It is understandable that each reader will judge this book from his individual point of view. He who stands upon the purely materialistic position, an unbeliever in religious matters, ignoring supernatural phenomena and only concerned in material interests, undoubtedly will regard this book as sheer nonsense, and I am not purposed to convert such people to any faith or to change their ideas. This work has exclusively been written for those who seek the pure truth and the supreme wisdom that they will indeed find in it. Many times our fellow men are argued and even persuaded into a special turn of mind, and here we often learn by experience that the various representatives of the different ideas cherish revengeful feelings towards each other for professional jealousy or for better knowing. The genuine magician will feel nothing but pity for people and creeds like that, but he will never hate or despise anyone. Whosoever seeks God, and whatever may be the way he chooses to lead him toward this goal, shall be paid his due respect. It is a pity, but also the truth that the clergy, theosophists, spiritualists, or whatever they are called, are antagonistically inclined, just as if only their chosen path leads to God. All men seeking this path to, and union with, God should always remember the words of Jesus Christ, the great master of the mystics, who said, "Love thy neighbor as thyself." This sentence ought to be a sacred command to any seeker of illumination on this spiritual path. Many of the beings who had to leave our material world and who had no opportunity at all on this planet to attain the true cognition, and the spirit complained in the higher spheres about the fact that the true knowledge reserved so long to the chosen ones in the past is not obtainable here below. Consequently, the mysteries that have been kept as secrets for thousands of years now are being revealed step by divine providence to those inhabitants of this earth who honestly long for the truth and perception. Evidently, the benefits of perception will never come overnight. They have to be acquired in very hard labor and with many difficulties and obstructions. A great number of people, if not most of them, will prefer to become convinced first of the truth of the rules to have faith, and only then will they make up their minds to enter the path of initiation. The honest magician will realize that this attitude of man is the wrong one. He is convinced that one has to be trained and educated for the faith by the initiation. By the mere reading of this work, one can, of course, achieve an intellectual knowledge, but not wisdom. Knowledge can be gained by transference, but wisdom must be acquired by experience and recognition, the latter depending on the spiritual maturity of the individual. And this maturity again is determined by the spiritual development that is formed on the path to initiation. Anybody who has been reading about the tarot will know as a fact that there are 21 more cards called the Great Arcana besides the first tarot card, which is symbolized by the magician in the Egyptian mysteries, being the cradle of all wisdom. And each of these tarot cards again includes an initiation system. Apart from the 22 Great Arcana, there are 56 minor arcane corresponding to the tarot cards, likewise symbolizing small mysteries, and each of these cards requires a description. Divine Providence will decide what and how much I shall be permitted to write and publish about the single tarot cards. Having penetrated to the real inner significance of this book, the reader will have arrived at the conclusion that there is neither a white nor a black magic. In fact, there is no difference at all between magic and mysticism or sciences like that. As I have mentioned at the outset, any science is neither good nor bad. It can, however, become a hindrance or a help according to the use man makes of it. The opinion of the existence of black magic is to be attributed to the fact that up to now men had not the least idea of what magic is. In the various chapters, in connection with the methods, I repeatedly pointed out that this type of science is only destined for the most sublime purposes. Furthermore, I have always fully shown that the magician is bound to ennoble his character in the course of his development to the highest degree to avoid an interruption, or even worse, a falling off in his rise. The ennoblement of the soul goes hand with the rise of the development. He who is keen only on gaining occult faculties and powers to brag of them will work in vain, for the ways of divine providence are forever inscrutable. He who aspires after occult powers for futile motives will be led away from his path sooner or later, occult faculties being only byproducts, a sort of compass of the development and meant for noble purposes and for helping our fellow men. Consequently, they are reserved exclusively to the true magician. He who has entered the path to initiation does not have to change his ideology as far as religion is concerned. True religion is in fact nothing else but the practice of the instructions given here, and any religion whatever can be brought into harmony with the present initiation system. But before entering this path, everyone should ask himself whether he will regard true initiation practically as his religion, that is, his life task which he is intent on fulfilling in spite of whatever hindrances and difficulties may be put into his way, and whether he will try hard to pursue and never to run away from this path as soon as he has entered it. It has to be taken for granted that an enormous, almost superhuman amount of endurance and patience, a tenacious willpower, and secrecy regarding his progress are the fundamental conditions. For all the readers desirous of perfection and who have chosen this book as their leader, I sincerely wish a good success and divine blessing. The author. On Earth, There was once a people who held the knowledge of the universe across space and time. They were the Israelites. Over time, their wisdom was scattered among all nations, with each taking a piece. In the end, this left them destitute. Now, listen to this profound wisdom passed down through great works, presented in your voice, from your own perspective, from the perspective of the Israelites themselves. For early access to chapters and full audiobooks, consider becoming a member. For just $10 per month, you can unlock exclusive access to this priceless wisdom, once stolen from our ancestors. Hear their voices through your own as you join us on this journey of discovery and reclamation.